All right. Howdy, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Okayest Trapper podcast. As always, we are brought to you by Mountain Tough Fitness. If you are wanting to shed some weight and gain some muscle to be more effective on your trap line, give it a try. Use the promo code OKAYEST30, that's all caps, OKAYEST30, and get a free 30-day trial and start your outdoor fitness journey today. Now, my guest today, by name, would need no introduction. That's because he is a true bow hunting legend, a big idol of mine when I started to get into bow hunting. And in fact, in 2009, he became the first person to take all 29 North American game species with a recurve bow to complete that super slam. But on top of his hunting, his guiding, and conservation efforts, he is above all things a trapper. By way of Colorado, Mr. Fred Eichler, welcome to the show.
How you doing, buddy?
Fantastic. I know we've been going back and forth a little bit, so I'm super excited to finally sit down and pick your brain and chat with you.
Well, I'm excited too, and it's funny, when you mentioned that, the trapping. That's really how it all started for me. To be, not only a love of the outdoors and having a dad that was a passionate outdoorsman, but growing up down south, I had a neighbor that used to be a Canadian longliner. So really, before I was shooting anything with a rifle, with a bow, with anything else, I was running the creek bottoms trapping, and that taught me a lot.
Well, that's a perfect segue, because my first question always is, what is your first memory of being exposed to trapping? And maybe talk about the South, where you lived, and maybe whether it was this longliner or your dad, that first real core memory of trapping.
Gotcha. Well, it was actually a neighbor, and Mr. Gilbert is how I knew him, and he had been a longliner in Canada, and he had retired down in Florida. And I lived out of the city limits in Florida, so we were where you have deer in the backyard, hogs, turkeys, that kind of thing. And man, he had mentioned to me one time that he was a trapper, and that kids, he saw me playing out in the yard with a BB gun. He was like, have you ever trapped? I'm like, no, sir, but gosh, I'd love to. And I mean, I was little fella, so 8, 9 years old. And so he brought me over some old, it started off with the long springs, what I mean? Like, oh, here's a 1.5, what I mean? I'm like, oh, okay. And he said, this is perfect for raccoons or possums. And I had some old number ones. And I was like, man, this is going to be great. And that was before all the, the coil springs and some of the other traps that I've graduated to now. But my trapping memory that really sticks in my mind is one that sadly sticks in my sister's mind as well, for a totally different reason. Well, although Mr. Gilbert had given me some ideas on how you need a trap and stake, and you need to do this, do that. Well, the first trap I set, I went down to the creek, and it was gone. The trap was gone, everything was gone. So I'd obviously done something wrong. So as a little kid, I'm like, okay, how do I keep this trap from disappearing? Well, I obviously need to stake it down better. And so I got some of my dad's rope that he used for his canoe, and I tied, not only did I put it on a stake, but then I tied my dad's rope to the trap ring, and then I tied it around a tree. So I had like 30 feet of rope, that I covered with dirt, and I was just trapping raccoons. And I was using some sardines because I didn't know what I was doing. And by gosh, I knew, raccoons like sardines. But long story long, I went back the next morning, and I told my sister she should come down and check traps with me, partially because I was scared. Well, I went down, and man, not only was the trap not there, but that line was stretched tight going to underneath this creek bank to a hole. And I was like, whatever I trapped, ran into this hole, took the stake right off, or actually it ended up just pulling the ring off my stake. But I pull on the rope, and I hear, Arr! I was like, ooh, I got something. And I was excited. So I run up to the house, and I grab my dad's 22 pistol, come running back down, and I convince my sister that she needs to pull on the rope. Now, I made her 9. My sister's young. She was probably like 6, 7 at the time. So she's pulling on the rope, but she can't get it by herself. So I have the pistol in one hand. This is not safe, and I do not advise anybody do anything like this. And so I'm helping my sister pull with one hand, and she's pulling with both hands. And out of this hole comes a very mad raccoon. Well, he goes right at my sister, and I commence to shoot him. Pop, 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 pop. I'm trying to shoot this raccoon. My sister drops the rope. She's screaming. My dad hears a lot of 22 rounds going off, and here's my sister screaming. So next comes my dad. So I'm super excited because I've just shot this raccoon to pieces, and it didn't eat my sister, so I thought I was a hero. My dad was not impressed, and taught me that I needed to start becoming a little better trapper, and that was not the way to do it. But that sticks in my mind, and interestingly enough, sticks in my sister's as well.
Yeah, I'm sure that story probably got brought up at every Christmas and holiday for the rest of your life. But hey, to your credit, you stopped it before it got to your sister, right? So I'm with you.
I thought I was a hero. Thank you, Zach. I thought I was a hero, man.
But I mean, talk about core memories and what's interesting, like you mentioned, not safe, blah, blah, blah. But that was an era where you could go and be a boy and you could take your sister and you could explore the bounds. And obviously, I'm sure accidents happen. It could have happened. It did not happen. And I'm sure your dad taught you a very hard lesson after that. But that just spurs a question in my mind, like with the lack of trapping today. Like, how do you think we as parents, like I'm a relatively new father, right? I have 3 kids under 3. I have 3, 1.5 and 2 months. So, my daughter's on my trap line with me quite a bit, but as they grow up, and I know you have some older kids, what would be your advice to parents to be able to, maybe in a safe, confined way, give that same type of exposure you had as a child when you first got to go trapping and had a little bit more leeway or leash to work with?
Well, that's a great question. And you brought up a great point. That was a day where nobody thought twice, especially in the country of a kid. I mean, young kid, walking down the road with a 22 over their shoulder, you know what I mean? Or a couple traps or whatever. At my high school, we would have guns in the back of our trucks. And so would the teachers. It wasn't, today you would probably be thrown in prison. So, it was a different era. So to your point, what I've done is I try and make it fun for the kids. And of course, safety is a huge part. But I learned kind of the hard way. I'm a little too hardcore sometimes for even my own kids. I think nothing of trudging around. It's 0 degrees. And I'm like, ooh, let's go break through the ice and set a beaver trap. This will be awesome. And the kids are freezing. So one of the fun things I think parents can do and the kids will get involved in is showing them right in the backyard. You don't have to live, out in the middle of anywhere like you do or like I do, where you're shooting elk or bear in the backyard or, you can trap a whatever right next to your place. Just teach them how to set a trap in the backyard. You can have a sandbox and go, hey, let's check out. This is what expanded the West. I mean, really, the trapping industry literally caused westward expansion. I mean, that's what it was about. Furs were worth so much money. So one of the things that I did with my kids that made it fun is, and it'll sound silly, but I think a lot of kids gravitate to it because kids are sponges and they want to learn, teaching them how to set a trap and hide it because they're into that. You know what I mean? This is how you set a trap, and this is how the ground looks now. And then we're going to come in and we're going to set this trap. And now you see if you can see where the trap is. You know what I mean? Or call your brother over and see if he knows where the trap is. And so that's fun. The other thing is plaster of Paris. To me, and I mentioned this earlier, trapping taught me, more than anything else about how animals use scent, how animals travel, how animals move through the woods. It taught me so much about hunting, about respect for animals, and really it has helped me with everything I've done outdoors. But the other part of that was taking the kids out and going, this is a raccoon track. This is a possum track. And this is what makes them different. And hey, you know what? Just so you remember it, let's mix some plaster of Paris and let's take an imprint ourselves of this track. And the kids were into that. You know what I mean? Oh, let's mix plaster of Paris. And they would look for the best track. Like, ooh, where's the best track? Is it in the mud? Is it in the soft sand? So little things like that, I would make fun for the kids. And then they would have their little, I still have some of, the things that roll around in the garage, but as an emotional father, I can't throw them out because it's like, oh, this is the bear track that me and Trent took in the plaster of Paris. Or, oh, this is one that the kids saw that was cool. So long-winded answer to your question, but I think teaching kids that stuff, even if they never trap, even just teaching them about American history. And one important part of American history trapping is you know what I mean, was, I should say was, and still is to me, but learning to respect those animals and talking to them about that.
I love that. Those are two ideas I hadn't thought of, but now I will definitely be employing as a father who does take my kids out on the line. I love the plaster of Paris idea, but I think my kids would definitely gravitate to like the disappearing Houdini act of, let's dig a little hole, let's make a dirt set. Who can make it disappear? And, we could up the ante and say, hey, let your brother walk over there till he finds it. No,
yes, no, but that, yeah, barefooted.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but that is fun. I mean, that's part of it. You know what I mean? I set a trap. Can you find it? Oh, can you find it? Can your brother find it? It's just fun.
That's awesome. And then, so the experience with your sister, that's your first real catch as an 8 or 9-year-old boy in Florida. What was the progression from there? What year was this? Because, a lot of folks I'm talking to were coming of age during the tail end of the fur boom. I'm not throwing you under the bus on your age or anything, Fred.
No, that's funny. I just realized in my head, we're talking, 50 years ago.
but that was kind of in the peak of the fur boom, though. So, as a young kid, were you able to make a little bit of pocket change?
I was, and that also fueled that passion. It was like, wow. You mean I could get paid for this? So I was double dipping. I was not only selling the hide, but I found out I could sell the meat. So I was literally, as a kid, I was selling possum meat, raccoon meat, and one restaurant was buying it, but that's a whole nother story. Again, we're talking
statute of limitations is over, right?
It was a great barbecue place, but it wasn't until I was a little older that I went, maybe that pulled pork wasn't pulled pork. But it was funny, it was neat. But that passion and that being able to be outdoors, that extra time outdoors led to me wanting to trap everything. It's like, okay, I've trapped raccoons. Now I want to trap possum. Ooh, I've trapped a possum. Now I want to trap a beaver. Well, the trapping was a big part of my life. And I moved to Colorado young. I was 20 years old. So I moved to Colorado. And I got hooked up with a damage control trapper and also an avid recreational trapper. His name was Joe, and he was good friends with me and one of my other, young buddies that worked at the archery shop with me. And so then that was next level. It was like, oh, let's go out and learn more. And Joe was more than willing to teach us more. You know what I mean? Okay, so then all of a sudden I'm trapping, red fox, gray fox, swift fox. Pine marten back then were the big money items. So me and my buddy Bly, we were long lining, and I say long lining, to us, that was over 100 traps. But, we were setting, 110s and leaning pole sets for pine martens. And then we had beaver sets at the same time, bobcat traps set out everywhere, coyote traps. So, that was really fun. And we were making some pretty dang good money, for back in the 80s, and early 90s. And I remember vividly the first bobcat pelt I sold, and I was like, oh, wow, I'm just going to trap bobcats forever. So I don't mean to bore you, but, I guess, and then that led to wanting to trap all kinds of different things. You know what I mean? Like, I want experiences, and I love the name of your podcast, the Okayest Trapper, because I can relate to that. I like to think I'm a pretty good trapper, but I wanted to learn a little bit about everything. I wanted to trap it all. So, am I a great muskrat trapper? No, but have I trapped muskrat? Yes, I have. Beavers and, pine marten and badger, the 3 foxes that we have here in Colorado, coyotes, bobcats, a little bit of everything.
Yeah. And first off, you're not boring me. I'm soaking this in. So lose that illusion if you have it in your head. But I agree with you, and that's been my take. I think everybody eventually over time, and it might even be the same with archery for you, like you will gravitate towards something that maybe you're better at. So like for me, it's beaver trapping and wolf trapping, but I still want to touch it all and see it all. And you grew up and you came of age in such a good time in Colorado, and we'll talk about how that might have changed some in your state over the last few years. But before we do that, so you were in Colorado, working in an archery shop and trapping, at what point you're known for archery, right? That is, at least in the industry, is great archer, right? I know you as a trapper just by, way of introductions of other mutual friends, but what was that bifurcation? At what point did it kind of stay like, I'm going to put a little more time into archery than trapping? And did that coincide with it becoming harder to trap in your home state of Colorado?
Well, it's funny you asked that. It never stopped. So, I've always trapped. So it was always a part of me and a part of what I did. So, even in, as I gravitated to other things, the predator hunting, I did a show for a while called Predator Nation, and that's still, MOTV still playing that. We're still doing a lot of predator shows, where I would share some of my trapping stuff. Yep. But, it's funny, as you progressed, or as I progressed, I never stopped the trapping. That was always a part of what I did, because it would teach me every year, how I would sense, for example. And, people that trap all know this. I was one of those guys that would go backwards and go, all right, I got a coyote in this trap. Where did he come from? I got a skiff of snow on the ground. Where did he come from to get in this trap? So I would backtrack, and go, oh, okay, check this out. He was working this tree line. He smelled my, he smelled my urine set, and he cut 30 yards away from this brush line because he smelled it. Mm-hmm. Came over, checked it out, and that's how I trapped him. So, I guess archery, it lended itself. Trapping lends itself to knowing more about the outdoors. And I've always shared that with people and said, trapping's taught me more about the outdoors and animals and relying on myself. You've got to rely on yourself. If you're trapping and you're out there in the winter and you're by yourself, you've got to be pretty physically fit, depending on what kind of line you're running. But, when I was running, traps, 8,000 to, 9,500 feet, hiking on your own, or sometimes in snowshoes or using snowmobiles, or something breaks down, you've got to be self-reliant. And then the learning how to take care of the hides, the skinning the animal correctly, fleshing, to me, it's the ultimate form of respect. Taking an animal and utilizing its meat or its hide. And I think of that all the time when I'm fleshing an animal, when I'm putting up a nice fur, when I'm stretching it and drying it, and people see that and they ask about it. There's a sense of pride there. So I would say, yes, I guess I diverged in a way because the trapping and the trapping led itself to predator hunting, because there were times I'd be on the trap line going, ooh, how do I call that coyote? I didn't catch him in a trap. I want to catch, I want more furs in the fur shed to make, more money and have, more furs. So that led to the bow hunting and the predator hunting. So they kind of all, if you will, it all progressed together. But, people seem more interested in the archery part, and the predator hunting and what I was doing. So that's what I, would show people.
Yeah. And I have more questions on. You started to actually answer one of the main questions I had, which is going to seem elementary, Rao, which is, being one of the more successful bow hunters in our modern era. Do you believe that your trapping experience played a part in making you a better hunter, which you already, yes. So maybe I'll address into what part of trapping specifically, if you can into one, has played itself most prominently in hunter?
Scent control. Literally scent control. Scent's everything when you're trapping, and scent is everything when you're bow hunting. So getting close, not letting the animal figure out where you're at, even where you walked in, that part of trapping literally mirrors, to me, bow hunting. You're talking about close range. Trapping is close range, trying to get an animal to put its foot in 1 square inch versus the whole rest of the world. And the same thing with bow hunting. You're trying to get an animal that's using its ears, its sense of smell, its everything, its eyes, to try and spot something that's out of place, and it's got to be close proximity. You've got to know almost inherently, like an animal, if you look at an area, where's the animal going to come in from? Where is it probably going to approach? Where would I need to set up to not get winded? So, I think that's answering your question. Is I would say, if there was one part that really, it's the animal knowledge that I learned from trapping, scent, and how animals work through the woods, and looking at an area, you can't help yourself. And I'm sure you do it too. Driving down the road, you're like, boy, I would set a trap right there, because any coyote or bobcat that cruises through is going to be at that little pinch point. You know what I mean? Or they just cut that, that hay meadow. So yeah, I would say scent. If it was boiled down, it would be scent and how animals move.
Yeah, I empathize with that, because I had a different chicken and egg problem. Like, I started trapping after I started hunting, and I started later in life in general. So like when I started bow hunting, it was all bow hunting. But then after I started trapping and then continued to bow hunt, my God, I was like completely distracted. Every time I'd be out in the woods, I'd be like, well, I'm on a creek bed or something. I see a beaver dam, or I'm like, well, that is like a coyote spot. And like, I would be completely distracted from the goal of elk hunting, deer hunting, just by all of the trapping opportunity. And, to further what you said, one of the things that I've been preaching on this show is, if you want to be a better hunter, go trapping. And a lot of it is because you can do the scent control, you can get more refined in your approach, but it's also just time in the woods. If you're doing responsible trapping and you're doing it year round, whether that's a state mandated 24, 32, 72 hour check, you just have to be out there.
100%. 100%. Yeah. I loved your analogy there. If you want to be a better hunter, be a trapper. And that, and I've referenced that in articles and in TV shows that, trapping has taught me so much. And I think people overlook that sometimes. And that's why I'm like, man, it is such an amazing thing to get out there. And it's a challenge, people that enjoy a challenge, man, don't go climb a mountain, go set a trap and see if you can outsmart an animal and get it to put its foot where you want it to, out of the whole rest of the world. And if it's a coyote or something else that's super wary, like, you mentioned wolf trapping, you try and do that without seeing where it was cruising, smelled something or saw something you didn't do right and took off. That will make you crazy. You know what I mean? Or one that learns your set and starts flipping traps. I mean, we've all had, I had a coyote one time that figured out what I was doing. I don't know if I pinched it once or what, but it would literally go through and hit every one of my sets. And I literally was losing my mind. I'm like, I'm getting outsmarted by a coyote. And not only is it outsmarting me, it's causing me to not trap anything else because it's getting all my traps. So, I had to go to somebody with more experience, more knowledge. I was like, Joe, what in the world do I do? Here's what's happening. Like I almost want to document this, because it seems like nobody would believe me that this coyote is intentionally, like, it's almost like getting a kick out of messing with my traps until they go off and then going to the next one. Like, what do I do? And he gave me all these great ideas. Dude, try this, try that. And it ended up working. He's like, set your set absolutely like normal, and then put another set in front of it with absolutely zero set. Make sure you do this, do that. And he said, and if you want, set another one and use a totally different scent and do this kind of, set. And I ended up catching this old grizzled female coyote that just knew the routine. But I was as proud of her. She still hangs in my game room. I'm as proud of that coyote as anything.
Yeah. I don't know if we're doing a good job selling trapping. They're like, yeah, you start with hair, you lose it all. And then
brown hair.
Yeah, exactly. It goes gray or whatever the case is, because you will go crazy. And I had similar experiences where I was being outsmarted by a fox who would go and pull my trap pan covers off. And then pee on
it. It's unnerving.
Yeah, it is. But
so tell me the story about the fox. How many did it do it to? How long did it take? And did you ever get it?
I did. Also one that I can't pan my camera over, but it's a cross fox that's hanging up on the wall right here. Again, also very proud of it. But a month and a half of me and this fox just parrying and, on cameras, on everything, just going up, even adjusting pan tension, everything. Like, she knew to adjust, whatever it was. It was just amazing. And grew a huge respect for canines, and it's only gotten worse as I've gone up to coyotes and then wolves on the intellect and being smarter than I am. But, eventually did connect, and that feeling of overcoming that barrier is unparalleled. Like, whether it's shooting elk or anything else, for me, at least, it's like, it's this intimate relationship you get when you become that close. And I think our mutual friend, Randy Newberg, he put it to me like this in relating at least rifle elk hunting and trapping. He's like, if you get me within 300 yards of an elk, I have a pretty good degree of confidence that I can put something on the ground. you get an animal within 2 yards of my 6-inch by 6-inch trap, I've still got a lot of work to do.
That's a great analogy. Sounds like Randy.
Yeah, very, very astute. But you know, with your evolution of trapping, like just from a tactical perspective, from people listening, like scent control being one of the biggest things that you take away from trapping, what was kind of your protocol for, controlling scent, both on traps as you were going in on your lines? Like, what was kind of your approach to controlling scent?
And that's a great question. And it's varied over the years. Like I said, when I started out, I was more just trying to overpower dumb animals with a food lure. You know what I mean? Like, okay, yeah, they may smell me. But, it also varies, because if you're in an area with a lot of people, you can get away with a lot more. You know what I mean? Obviously. So if there's, if you're trapping something, like a raccoon that's never been trapped and he's used to smelling people, he's not going to flip out if he goes down there and smells, human scent. However, if you're after a coyote, to a degree, the same thing. If I'm trapping a coyote on a farm where there's people and human scent, and guys are working on irrigation, so they smell people along the grass, and where they're opening gates, or flooding fields, it's a little easier to trap that coyote because they're used to a little bit of human scent. But let him get pinched once, or an area where they're, where people are actively trapping, or even more out, where they're not used to human scent, and it's not a common thing. So a lot of it was the stereotypical stuff, the gloves. I went from leather gloves back in the day to rubber gloves, to now sometimes, depending on where I'm trapping, I'll go as far as changing out and putting new rubber gloves on every, you know what I mean? Like, okay, I touched my truck, I touched this scent, you know what I mean? I'm going to put new gloves on. So I'll take some of the big, the big gloves, like even some of the HME, the overlays, and I'll put them on over the gloves that I had every set, just so I know my gloves are clean. And then I'll do the normal, I'll rub them in dirt. I'll rub them in the mud, you know what I mean? First, I'm like, okay, what ground's next to me that's going to smell right? I'll have a throat pad, and I'll change my throat pads based on different areas. You know what I mean? Like, okay, this one smells like me now. I can't flip this over backwards, or I'm putting this scent, introducing it to the ground, because I can't just kneel over as good as I used to. I like to think I'm still in pretty good shape, but if I'm working a big setup, or I'm a double set, I'm going to be on a knee for a little bit. So I'll have a pad, and I'm really funny about that as well. So it's really taken another level to me, depending on what I'm trapping. And, that adds a lot to it too, right? It's all fun, and it's all how serious you want to get. But when it works, 2 years ago, and they can't, everybody and their brothers trapping in Texas, and the ranch next to us traps, and this other ranch traps, and these coyotes, man, they just can't be caught. And to me, I was like, I want to come trap, let me come trap coyotes there. So, I had a blast. I trapped multiple coyotes. My buddy was blown away, so I looked cool to him, but I also trapped raccoons. I trapped possums. It was fun. So I still enjoy going other places, and setting rigs too, not just in Colorado.
That's awesome. In the spirit of the title of the podcast, right? The Okayest Trapper, I am new. Like, selfishly, this podcast was born out of my desire to learn from people like you and other people who have a lot of experience across the nation. But one of the questions I always like to ask, like, if you had to pick out a moment on your trap line where you made the biggest mistake that might have cost you, like, a coyote you wanted to trap or something else like that, like what was your biggest mistake that you can remember making on your trap line?
Man, there's been so many, especially in the beginning. There's been so many, and trying to think back of those, because pine martens are easy, and those are the ones we were trapping for money. But as far as the predatory, and not really a canine as far as a large animal, but a predatory small animal, they were relatively easy to trap. But whether it was coyotes or bobcats, a lot of it was just my presentation. You know what I mean? Setting traps too close, setting traps too far. You know what I mean? Not thinking about the different size of the animal. You know what I mean? How far I wanted to put the trap back or offset it from a dirt hole set, or from a urine set. You know what I mean? Or from a blind set. Whatever I was doing. So I think that cost me a lot of money, especially, when I started out, especially on the bigger animals, because I would trap enough of them, enough bobcats, enough coyotes, to where it was like, oh man, and in my mind, you know what I mean? I was making sometimes $2,000, $2,500 a month selling furs, but in my mind, I was like, I should be making $4,000 or $5,000. You know what I mean? I've got, I messed up here, man. That track was right there. It was almost my set. I messed up. And how did I mess up? Whether it was subtle guide sticks, you know what I mean, versus huge guide sticks for bobcats, or just things like that. Natural walkthrough sets for bobcats. Sometimes I had them too tight or boxed in. So now I think back to all those, and I go, why didn't I make more double sets? You know what I mean? Now I have, realizing how curious animals are too. Man, now it's common for me to have, a coyote. I shouldn't say common, but it's not that infrequent to have, a coyote and a fox looking at each other, or a bobcat and a coyote looking at each other. So when I was in good areas, I wasted a lot of time sometimes putting one set there when a double set would have served, a lot better.
Yeah. So I guess that's the moral of get steel on the ground. If you've got a good spot, then there might be more animals walking around. So it's worth putting it on the ground.
Yeah. And you trip that set. I mean, how many times have you gone to a trap that was, tripped, or, something happened, and you're like, there's tons of traffic right here. If I would have set 3, now I have one that wasn't working for me. So,
and with that too, like that made me think of another question, one that I actually don't have written down on my little sheet here, which is, if you had to think about where you made money as a trapper, like species, could you start to pinpoint the number one type of set that has been the most producing for you? Like, is it a dirt hole? Was it conibears for beaver? Like, just thinking like on your broad history in trapping, like what set has been the most consistent and paid off the most for you over your lifetime?
And I'm going to go back because you can't trap them in Colorado anymore. But again, it was pine martins. We were getting, $60 to $80 a piece for pine martins, and, a lean and pole set with a 110, you know what I mean? Just pinched, we put, 4 little roofing nails and just pinch it on there. So it was a quick set. Boom, boom. You know what I mean? You'd run.
Oh, so you didn't even have a box. You were just.
Oh, no, man. We were just running them. We were just,
nice.
you'd pinch it on a couple of roofing nails, set it, and roll. And, don't get me wrong. I've seen cone sets and the box sets and everything else. But for what we were running, it was fast. It was efficient. Now, could super deep snow block you out? Sure, it could. But where we were setting them and underneath firs or underneath spruce trees and things like that, where we weren't getting hammered for quick and setting a lot of sets, that lean and pole 110 pinched on some roofing nails for us, for pine martins, would probably brought in a lot of money. Then it was the bobcats. I mean, understand, there was a time I was getting $1,000, $1,100 for bobcats in Colorado. So, then it was walk through and dirt hole. Those bobcats, I would love to, trapping bobcats on walk through sets. And in the right spot, if you could subtly box them in, dirt hole sets even as well. So, as far as the money goes, that was it. Because they're also quick to clean. So I was always looking at time management. Beavers are great. And there was back at a time I was trapping, but when I looked at the time to skin a beaver versus a bobcat, when I look at the time to properly flesh a beaver, I mean, you tell me how many bobcats could you skin, flesh, and put on a stretcher versus a beaver?
I'm a glutton for punishment, so I plead the 5th.
I love it.
But yeah, I mean,
well, I'm right though. It's probably 4 to 1, 5
yeah,
to 1.
Yeah.
So really for me, I love the beavers. That's fun. I still enjoy trapping, but it's it's one of those, if you look at time management versus money and what you get, you know what I mean? Okay. You could get a lot more doing that.
And speaking of like that time management on what it takes from a time to flesh and tube a bobcat and get them on a board versus a beaver, one of the other questions, same vein, Okayest Trapper, is what's the biggest mistake you made in your fur shed?
Oh man, there's been lots. Not in the beginning. fortunately, I had some really good fur buyers. John Solo and Major Boddicker were the guys up in Fort Collins, Colorado, that were buying furs at the time. And then I started selling to a guy down in Trinidad when I, came down to southern Colorado. But those guys were great because they would tell you how to make more money. They were like, Fred, this bobcat's worth, X, but had you done this, it would have been worth this. And I'm like, wow. So probably the biggest mistakes, not fleshing completely, not fleshing properly. You know what I mean? A lot of people don't realize how important, part of that process is. Not stretching or drying properly or evenly, just it drove me crazy because I'm like, wait a minute, that's a beautiful, high altitude, bobcat. And, you gave me this much for the other one. Well, yeah, but you stretched this one uneven. And
one looks like a football. And
yes, presentation, or, it doesn't measure out. And right now they're buying based on this, the length of the belly or this or that. So those things, I made a lot of mistakes early on and, realizing that presentation, taking the time to clean all the blood, or, take the burrs out, brush it, comb it. Those were things that I was happy to learn, but they taught me so much and increased, it's amazing the difference you can get. You know what I mean? When a buyer says, well, had this been like this, I would have given you $30 more. And then you look at 30 coyotes and you go, oh, that adds up to a lot of money, So I know it was a long-winded answer to your question, but yeah, in the first shed, I would, if I broke it down, it would be presentation, and fleshing properly.
Yeah. And with this podcast being focused on people who might be wanting to get into trapping, like oftentimes I kind of gloss over the work that goes into the fur shed because I think a lot of people are shocked, and it might be a barrier of entry when you realize like going out and trapping is a lot of fun. You learn a lot, but the real work, it's like having a second full-time job is what a lot of people relate it to. And it's the truth. So, with kids and stuff, how did you handle introducing the back half? Like obviously it goes to the respect of the animal, the conservation efforts, making sure that you're honoring them. But like, do you have any tips or tricks for either parents or people new to trapping on how to mentally handle the amount of work it takes once you do get success on your trap line?
I'll tell you what it was for my boys. It was sharing the money. Especially with, literally it was sometimes like, okay, hey, and then all the boys chip in and work on the ranch with me in the farm and they're involved in everything. But, all the boys can skin, flesh, and put coyotes on a stretcher. You know what I mean? And that was very, it was important to me, for them to learn. But, I think part of it was, hey, man, I'm going to give you some money because this is going to be worth some money. And if I can save money, and while you're doing this fur, I can be doing this one. We're going to do it, a lot faster. Or to the point of, I remember like, when Trent caught his first bobcat, he was so excited because he would check traps for me. And then I would go, all right, I'm going to just go back and set those. But I think he was, I don't know, probably 13, 14. But, he's like, oh, man, you caught a cat. I'm like, oh, what did you do? Which trap was it in? And he's like, well, I reset it. And I'm like, oh, good for you. And honestly, I was like, oh boy, he reset it. I'm probably going to have to go. But the next day he had another bobcat that was attracted to the bobcat set that was there. So he was on fire. He thought that was the coolest thing ever. But it's great now because, by showing them how to do it and then saying, hey, I'm going to share this with you. Or, hey, you can buy that, that cool game or that cool, rifle for Trent. It's handguns. You can buy that cool handgun, or you can get some more ammo, or you can buy the bow. It was bribery.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, that's what got our country to where we're at today. So I'm all for it. Keep it going with the family. And you get help in the fur shed, so it's a win-win-win. Now, Colorado. I know we mentioned before we hit record that I'll be down and like near Colorado Springs for the CRWM, like Outdoorsman Days event to do some trapping 101 demos. But in doing my research, right, the public and private land trapping rules are, the word is not even stringent. It is extreme. How have you on the ground as a trapper a lot of this craziness, to post this craziness, seeing the evolution of trapping in Colorado?
It's been really tough, and sadly, it's a lot of times why I trap out of state. You know what I mean? Just because sometimes it's easier now. Most of my trapping is the form of damage control trapping. It's trapping is the most efficient way, to help manage predators. And there's so many things that go along with that. We've had areas where rabies have been issues. You know what I mean? Diseases, mange. There's a ton of benefits to trapping. So a lot of my trapping now is damage control trapping. For example, right now I've got beavers that dammed up a natural spring that fills up a reservoir that we irrigate our hay out of. So, that's a major issue. We're not putting water on hay. We can't irrigate. You know what I mean? It's time to trap those beavers. That falls under, damage control trapping. But it is very difficult because it's not really recreational trapping so much. Unless it's box trapping, you know what I mean? Which again is very regulated, and I'm sure you've seen that. The problem in a lot of states is that we have the public voting on management issues, whether it's trapping, whether it's mountain lions, whether it's big game. My problem with that is we have wildlife biologists that are trained, that understand animals and understand what, how important, whether it's trapping or any kind of wildlife management, hunting, shooting, damage control things, and how they all tie in. The ag, the agriculture department working with the, DOW. I refuse to call them parks and wildlife. That's a whole nother thing, because they're stealing from hunters to put it into parks, but that's a whole nother issue. I'm one that thinks at this point in Colorado, we should fire all the wildlife biologists. And I have friends that are wildlife biologists, but we have stopped listening to wildlife biologists, and we're not making decisions on sound wildlife management. What we need to do is hire marketing departments. We need to hire marketers to market it to the general public, because that's the issue. Because they don't understand the correlation between, little Billy got bit by a rabid raccoon, or, the German Shepherd that we love just got killed by a mountain lion, or, oh my gosh, yeah, deer are wonderful, but how many people died because they weren't managing the deer population? And deer strikes on vehicles cause all kinds of major issues, not only with insurance, but also where people were hurt because of that. I mean, it's a very frustrating thing in Colorado, and I struggle with it, to be honest with you. But I struggle with it in other states too, where the same thing's happening. If they get enough votes to put it on the ballot, and a lot of the things that they're putting on the ballot have nothing to do with wildlife management. They don't care about the animals. A lot of these anti-hunting, anti-trapping organizations, they don't really care about the animal. They'll tell you they do, but they don't. And do you mind if I digress into another, the mountain lion issue I've got to bring up?
Please do.
And here's my proof that they don't care about the animals. They voted down mountain lion hunting in California. Okay. They spent millions and millions of dollars, false ad campaigns, all kinds of stuff, killing mountain lions and leaving babies. The outfitters weren't doing that. You know what I mean? The mountain lion hunters weren't doing that. But they stopped mountain lion hunting in Colorado. They had to hire damage control trappers to trap mountain lions in Colorado. They were killing more mountain lions in the state of Colorado through damage control trappers than they were when there was a legal mountain lion season. Now, if you genuinely care about an animal, is it more respectful for that animal to be harvested, the meat eaten, the hide utilized and put on the wall as our forefathers have done, and drawings of caves, or wearing those furs, or admiring them as a trophy, or to trap that animal and throw it in a ditch? And so California's messed up anyways. You know what I mean? They're losing money left and right. People are trying to bail out of that state. But just that decision, one, from the economic side, it impacted outfitters. It impacted, tons of, residual income makers, from meat processors to taxidermists. The state was at least bringing money in from mountain lion hunters. Now the state is paying money out to trappers. Now, if I was an anti-hunter that cared about the animal itself, as all trappers, hunters that I know and hang out with do, they genuinely care and love and appreciate and respect the animal, I would consider that a travesty. If I contributed to stopping mountain lion season in California, and now more lions are getting killed, and the animals weren't getting utilized, they were getting wasted, I would be devastated. I literally would. I would go, I've made such a horrible mistake here because this is not what I intended. But they don't. They consider that a success because it's not about the animal. It's about trying to keep people from doing what they want to do. It's communism. Whatever. I go nuts. But it's. I have a major problem with it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I fully agree, really, on all the points. And you know what's interesting to me? I have a follow-on question for that. But like we see this being presented on the ballot now in November in Colorado. And to your point about like the need for hiring marketers, like I have a few thoughts. One is, the trapping side is just low hanging fruit because we have not done a great job at recruiting and retention of trapping as a heritage in a long time. But I see a change. Like I'm actually talking to several people in Colorado. And one of the reasons I'm going to do this demo, people like, I'd like to get into trapping, but I live in Colorado. So if there are people and we want to get people into the sport of trapping to have a good face for it, what would be your advice for people specifically in Colorado? How would you go about navigating the shaky waters to even get some experience in trapping so then you could actually be a better voice for it? What would you say to Coloradans who want to be involved? How would they do that?
Colorado's for Responsible Wildlife Management is a great organization in Colorado that literally is helping educate people about all kinds of things in Colorado. But we need organizations like that. So I think getting involved or looking at organizations like that, talking to people that are trappers, watching podcasts like yours where you get excited, where people, that's how people are learning things now. You know what I mean? Like, I want to go do this. I'm going to look it up. There's so much information available. My problem is there's so much false information. The negative side of whether it's social media or TV or, a lot of the, things is there's false information. A lot of it, whether it's in our politics or whether it's in our laws or, things that people are putting out. When they fought bears in Colorado, they were like, do you think it's okay to hunt this poor bear? And they show a sow with cubs, or it was illegal to hunt a sow with cubs. So they were misrepresenting the truth. So I think it's important to get educated, to weed through some of the BS, if you will, and learn from people that are proponents of trapping. I would love to see the DOW do more on, hey, you want to experience another, great way to, enjoy Colorado outdoors. Check this out. And, here's different animal traps. And yes, you can use box traps and you can go out and do this. And this is a great thing to do with your kids and, to help experience in the outdoors, just like kayaking or mountain biking. There's a ton of different things, but let's get kids outside and stop with the stupid, the stupid box or the phones all day. Get them out there and enjoying some of that stuff like you're doing with your children and like I've done with mine. So, man, it's a great question. Just, sadly, I think there's a lot better opportunities in other states right now. And I think, sadly, California, Colorado, I mean, I passed. I was in RMEF. I went to an RMEF, the Rocky Mountain Elk Calling, World Championships event in Montana, and I'm hit with a giant sign about, make Montana trap free. And I'm like, they're infiltrating everywhere. It's unreal.
Yeah, I think I was in Bozeman a week or two before that, and I had driven in through Bozeman, like through the Yellowstone. There's 2 or 3 of those trap-free Montana signs with some really interesting photoshopping.
Yeah.
And there's some on everything, like even going out towards Livingston, they've hit every corner when you approach into Bozeman, which is unreal. But I mean, again, it goes back to marketing, and we should be investing in marketing on our side too. And, being good proponents, having more articulate voices like yours and Randy's and others that are, talking logically.
Yeah, it's just educating people, right? It's just educating people. And to me, it's frustrating if when the wildlife departments don't stand behind that and don't have a voice. You know what I mean? Or the biologists can't go, no, this is ridiculous. You know what I mean? This is the way things should be run. And a lot of that comes down from politicians that are running these, wildlife departments. So it's very frustrating. But I do think you're spot on. I'll refer people to your podcast just so they can get their foot in the door and go, this is exciting. I want to learn more. But I hope Colorado kind of turns around a bit. I want to see the pendulum swing the other way, which I'm always optimistic, and I hope it does.
Yeah, we got to push for it. But with that, like, what do you believe is the biggest misconception in trapping that the general public holds?
There's a bunch of them. It's you're restraining an animal, which is all you're doing. The way I used to get permission, on farmers, properties back in the day in Colorado, as I would set a trap off on my hand, and I go, this is a trap I'm using, you know what I mean, that I'll be using, and these pictures of hurt feet or mangled legs, it's not like that at all. I let animals go. If I have a non-target catch, that animal's absolutely fine. You know what I mean? So I would show pictures even back then, like, oh, here, you know what I mean? This guy was happy to know that his neighbor's dog was trespassing on him. I caught the dog and I released the dog unharmed. But he was then able to call his neighbor and go, hey, I don't want your dog on my property chasing my cows, my sheep, my goats, or my deer, or my children potentially. So, I think the misconception is that it's cruel. It's not. The misconception is that there's no need for it. There is, and there's even more of a need for it now than ever. I was in Texas. They're overrun with raccoons. They're overrun because as fur prices are going down, less people are trapping, less people are hunting predators. So one of the problems, not only in Colorado, but all over, is they're starting, some of the biologists are going, wow, we couldn't figure out what's happening with turkey populations. And then we realized there's 500 raccoons in a 5-mile square area. A turkey hen doesn't have a chance of those eggs, making it, or certainly not the chicks. So education is huge. I think they have to look at how things are interrelated. I think it might have been Henry David Thoreau that wrote, you can't pluck a flower without troubling a star. And, that was, talking about the relationship between all things. And as people aren't managing predators, whether that's, and I go to raccoons a lot because raccoons are very damaging. Raccoons, possums, coyotes, or any of them, they're seeing more problems with mange, rabies again, which didn't used to be as big of an issue, but it's starting to rear its ugly head again, and then again, all the songbirds, the game birds, quail, turkeys, and things like that, ducks. There's such a correlation. And it seems like we're always behind the 8 ball. Instead of, being, proactive, we're being reactive after we see an issue. And after turkey hunters all over the country are reporting, hey, we're seeing more raccoons than we've ever seen and less turkeys than we've ever seen. I wonder what's going on.
Yeah, it's the second order effects that often get overlooked.
Yes,
but, Fred, so I want to respect your time. We're about to come up on an hour. I have a bajillion more questions, so we might have to do a second part at some point in the future if you're up for it. But
I would love to anytime.
Perfect. So 2 questions. Well, really 3. We're going to kind of do rapid fire. What do you see as the future of trapping?
Sadly, if I was honest, I just said I'm an optimist, but I worry about it. Without more education, without more trappers saying that they're trappers, without people, saying, hey, I'm a trapper and I'm proud of it. And, this is how important it is. Without game departments, standing up, whether it's biologists, whether it's game wardens, whether it's, parks departments saying, talking about the benefit of trapping and how important it is. I think it's not looking great, sadly.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, and I agree with you. I'd love to go deeper on that one, but that'll have to be reserved for episode number 2 with you. Last 2 questions. These are ones I ask every guest. You've had a lifetime in the woods. What is the wildest experience that you've ever had in the woods?
Man, I've been charged by leopards. I've been charged by brown bears. I've been charged by grizzlies. I've had some absolute wild encounters. But yeah, probably one of the situations where I almost got eaten. I've got a YouTube channel, where I think we've got a video of that. I was in a raft. We weren't pestering the animals. We were just literally in a raft floating down it to get to an area to hunt. When we rounded the corner and there was a brown bear sow with a couple cubs, and she ran over the cubs trying to get to us, and a handgun saved the day by deterring the bear. I'm not going to ruin the story. Like I said, I know you're getting down on your time here, but yeah, so that would have been, I've had a couple wild ones. I've been stranded in Alaska because of a plane crash. I've had all kinds of crazy ones, but yeah, the stuff where they almost eat you, those are always pretty exciting.
Yeah, I think those ones probably stick in the memory a little bit more. And just like that raccoon who almost ate your sister. So
yeah, that stands out in her mind a whole lot.
Last question. This always ends with a hypothetical. So from now until you're in your grave, if you had the opportunity, would you be able, let me rephrase this more properly. From now to the end of your days, if you could only bow hunt, but you could bow hunt any critter that you wanted to, or would you take the opportunity to trap only with no bow hunting or other types of bow hunting, but you could trap any type of animal for the rest of your life? Would you choose trapping or bow hunting?
Trapping, that's an easy one.
Okay.
Yeah, if I could trap anything, like you said, if I could just trap, not this one, yeah, then I would keep trapping, because it's the same thing to me. You know what I mean? And so if I was limited to just one thing, bow hunting, yeah, I would choose trapping, because it's that more time outdoors.
Well, that's a hat tip. And Fred, first and foremost, thank you very much. I know you are very busy. I appreciate the time you took. I have learned a lot. I'm sure all of our listeners have. If people want to learn more, obviously, I know you have tons of shows. Like, what's active right now? Where can people find out about what you're doing, what your family's doing? Where can they sign up to be guided by you? Like, just do all the plugs.
No problem. It's we stay pretty booked up right now. We're booked up through next year on the outfitting business, but I do have an outfitting business called Full Draw Outfitters. All the boys guide with me, which is fun. I've got a fan page, Instagram, Facebook, and I have a YouTube channel where a lot of that stuff, I'm showing people simply, like, especially for new guys, like when they go, how do I skin something? So my YouTube channel breaks that down, how to skin everything from alligators to, fox, coyotes, iguanas, kind of whatever. So that's kind of a fun deal. And the TV show is called Everything Eichler. It airs on the Sportsman's Channel.
Awesome. Well, Fred, you're a legend. I appreciate the time. Glad to be able to call you a friend. And for everybody listening, we'll catch you on another episode of the Okayest Trapper podcast.
It was an honor. Thanks.